In 1984, Virginia's Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened the Big Bad Wolf, a legendary suspended roller coaster that was beloved by enthusiasts all over the world. However, at the relatively young age of 25, this coaster would suddenly close to the disappointment of many.
But how could such a popular roller coaster meet such a sudden end? Let's take a look at the rise and fall of the Big Bad Wolf, right here on Theme Park Crazy. On May 16, 1975, Busch Gardens the Old Country would open to the public in James City, County, Virginia. Developed by the Anheuser-Busch Beer Company, this park was a celebration of all things Europe. Areas themed to England, Scotland, France, and Germany would feature a plethora of attractions for guests to enjoy. These include a train ride, a log flume named Le Scoot, and a medium-sized roller coaster named Glissade. Now, this roller coaster was designed by legendary coaster guru Anton Schwarzkopf. He, along with his company, would create several famous steel roller coasters throughout the 1970s. Glissade would be created at the height of his popularity, but the same year it opened, Schwarzkopf would reportedly get into a dispute with another manufacturer.
Aircraft manufacturer Messerschmitt would debut its own roller coaster at the world-famous Oktoberfest. This coaster, named Alpenflug, would be the first modern suspended roller coaster. Famous coaster designer Werner Stengel would develop the attraction, but it didn't end up as he hoped it would. In order to save costs on manufacturing, Messerschmitt ignored Stengel's suggestion to bank the track's turns. As a result, the swinging trains put far too much stress on the track and supports, and the ride would be a maintenance nightmare. Schwarzkopf was allegedly unimpressed with the design, and was said to be unhappy with Messerschmitt suddenly deciding to enter the coaster market. Schwarzkopf was rumored to have stated that it would be like if his company started designing airplanes. As a result of its flaws, the ride would only last for a few weeks, although Messerschmitt did allegedly plan on building more of them. Regardless of the behind-the-scenes drama though, the coaster was well received by festival goers. Unfortunately, the flaws of the prototype seemed to keep the suspended coaster concept off the market for quite some time. It wasn't until 1981 that this concept was attempted again.
6 years later, in 1981, another suspended coaster would open to the public. This new coaster, named the Bat, was a prototype model by American manufacturer Aerodynamics. At the time of its opening, this coaster received quite a bit of media attention. Like the Alpenflug, it received a positive reception from riders. However, the Bat would face the unfortunate coincidence of having the same problem as its predecessor. Once again, the manufacturer neglected to bank the track. Had the ride used bank turns, the forces of the trains would evenly be distributed. But without banking, the trains would put an uneven pressure on the track. It was as if the ride vehicles were trying in vain to forcefully bank the track. Now, as a result, the trains would suffer from premature wear and tear, and the track was both warped and cracked in many spots. Despite its popularity with guests, the damage became too expensive for the park to fix. So after just 3 seasons, the Bat was shut down.
Despite its failure, the guest reception of the Bat proved there was a demand for suspended roller coasters, and after the recent success of Busch Gardens' Loch Ness Monster, the park was eager to add one of these coasters to their lineup. Having worked with Schwarzkopf several times in the past, Busch Gardens would hire the company to build their own suspended coaster model. Some say Schwarzkopf was eager to take on the project to stick it to Messerschmitt for Alpenflug's failure. He would immediately start working on a suspended coaster prototype in his workshop. Photos of the unfinished model would even appear in Schwarzkopf's promotional material, suggesting his company planned to mass produce it. Sadly though, despite allegedly starting construction on the Big Bad Wolf, Schwarzkopf's company would face severe financial issues. This led to his exit from the project and the initial concept's abrupt cancellation. This cancellation even caused Busch Gardens to forfeit their $500,000 deposit they already made to Schwarzkopf. So with Schwarzkopf out of the picture, Busch Gardens would hire Aerodynamics to build an improved version of their own suspended coaster model. Arrow had recently built the world-famous Loch Ness Monster for the park, so Busch Gardens had no qualms with hiring them. Despite the failure of the Bat, Arrow was eager to resurrect the model and make it a mainstay in the amusement industry, so with the plans in place, construction swiftly began.
Taking inspiration from Aesop's fables and Grimm's fairy tales, this new roller coaster would be named and themed after the world-famous Big Bad Wolf. The project would be incredibly ambitious, costing around $14.8 million when adjusted for inflation. The coaster itself would feature extensive Bavarian theming and a winding layout that twisted through the woods. It would have a top height of 100 feet and a top speed of 48 miles per hour. Busch Gardens referred to it as traveling at the speed of fright. This time around, the track would be banked in order to prevent the same issues that doomed the Bat. The ride's climax would feature a large banked turn over the river, which directly followed an impressive 80-foot drop down a hill. Ironically, though, the drop would end up causing more problems than the turns.
One night, engineers were testing the ride with sandbag dummies. However, after descending the drop and maneuvering the bank turn at the bottom, one of the train's guide wheels collided with a steel support. Specifically, guide wheels are small wheels on the bottom of the ride vehicles used to keep them stable entering the station. It was immediately discovered that the trains were traveling too fast on the final drop. The train went into the turn so fast that the sudden shift in momentum caused it to swing too strongly. By the time it completed the turn, it was in a position that allowed the guide wheel to hit the support. To remedy this issue, 2 more sets of brakes were added to the layout, including a trim brake that would be installed on the final drop. Unfortunately for the park, this incident caused quite an embarrassment for them.
The incident literally happened the night before the ride's proposed grand opening. Engineers tried to quickly fix the issue, but they just couldn't do it in time. Hours before its scheduled debut, engineers made the decision to cancel the opening. Over 1,000 people had shown up for the grand opening, and all were left disappointed. As the Daily Press put it, Big Bad laid a big egg. One of these guests was a veteran actor, Vincent Price. Price would vow to ride the coaster as soon as he could once it's opened. Fortunately, the speed problem would be fixed within just a few days, and just 3 days after the disastrous grand opening, the press was invited back to ride the coaster. Thankfully, it worked this time around. By July 1st, this wolf was in fully operational mode.
The ride experience went as followed. Guests would start out by exiting the station, completing 2 slow turns before ascending the first lift hill. After reaching the top, the trains would descend into a mock Bavarian village. This was one of the most memorable parts of the ride, as guests encountered several near-miss moments with the building facades. The swinging trains helped give the illusion that they would crash at any second, but it was all part of the thrilling experience. On this ride, you were the Big Bad Wolf, running rampant through the village and terrifying the residents. After the village, riders would descend into a helix, which was said by many to be quite forceful. What followed was the coaster's grand climax. Another chain lift would take guests up a hill before turning them leftwards towards the main drop. Then the train would dive downwards towards the park's Rhine River, immediately hitting a forceful bank turn to the left. 2 more speedy bank turns later, the trains would hit the final brake run, and the ride experience would come to an end.
This coaster was critically acclaimed upon its opening and was an instant hit with park guests. In less than 4 months, over 600,000 people got to ride this coaster. That's more than the entire population of Wyoming. Surprisingly, though, it only increased park attendance by around 9,000. This was only a quarter of the increase park officials were hoping for after such a big investment. Amusement park analysts blamed its underperformance on 1984 being a bad year in general for the amusement industry. Poor weather, along with several notable incidents at other parks, had allegedly hurt the industry that year. Analysts also predicted the ride would take 45 years to pay off with such a small growth rate. Unfortunately, its initial letdown didn't stop the ride from gaining a massive following among thrill seekers.
Over the years, park guests would heap praise on the coaster, and many still remember it fondly to this day. The elaborate theming was extremely impressive for a non-Disney 1980s roller coaster. And even with the trim brake, the drop into the river is still considered one of the best suspended roller coaster moments of all time. And over a decade after its closure, it's still one of the most cherished roller coasters ever built. YouTube user Rachel says, "Riding the Big Bad Wolf in the pitch dark was some of the best memories of my childhood." YouTube user Ship904 says, "The thrill of riding through the village and across the lake was amazing." And YouTube user Rocketfoot7 says, "Big Bad Wolf was one of my all-time favorite coasters growing up." The Wolf would run strong through the rest of the 80s and all of the 90s. By the late 2000s, the Wolf was still going strong, fitting in nicely with newer attractions like Alpengeist, Apollo's Chariot, and Griffin. However, upon reaching its quarter-century mark, the unthinkable was about to happen.
In 2009, the Big Bad Wolf was celebrating its 25th anniversary. At the time, it was the second oldest roller coaster operating at the park, and its popularity showed no signs of slowing. But on July 24th, the park would shock the amusement industry by announcing the ride's closure. Park fans were both shocked and devastated at the ride's announcement, and many wondered how such a popular attraction could meet such a sudden end. According to the park's announcement, the ride had reached the end of its service life. Many had speculated that after the manufacturer went bankrupt in the early 2000s, spare parts were much harder to come by. Some have also assumed that the ride was in disrepair and that fixing it would have been too expensive for the park. However, the coaster continued to operate after the announcement, so it was definitely safe to ride. More likely than not, the park simply wanted something new and fresh. More specifically, a major expansion and renovation of the Oktoberfest area was in the works, and an older roller coaster like the Wolf just didn't fit in with those plans. Last rides would be given in September, and by 2010, the track was completely removed.
3 years later, the Oktoberfest renovation would come into fruition. The main attraction of this refurbished area was a brand new roller coaster built right on the Wolf's spot. Built by German manufacturer Zierer, this coaster would be named Verbolton. This multi-launched roller coaster takes guests into the Black Forest with an indoor track section and a vertical drop track element. More notably, this new coaster included several tributes to the Wolf. The cycling effects of the indoor segment included one where wolves would menacingly chase the passengers. In addition, the orange train's license plate reads Wolf Crossing. Most notably, Verbolton's layout would also feature a drop and bank turn sequence over the river, and it would even reuse the concrete footers of its predecessor. This was a wonderfully fitting tribute, and many consider Verbolton to be a worthy successor to the Wolf. Still though, the Big Bad Wolf remains one of the most sorely missed roller coasters in theme park history. While it's indeed gone for good, the memory of the Wolf will live on forever. Before we wrap things up, I want to give a special thanks to Jonah Scott for helping me out with this episode. He's an incredible voice actor who was absolutely amazing to work with. If you want to check out his work, I highly recommend watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Beastars, the latter of which he actually plays the lead role in. You can watch both of these shows right now on Netflix. He also regularly streams on Twitch, and if you want to check him out there, I've put a link in the description. Also, I want to give a special shout out to my newest Patreon supporters. Verbal shoutouts start at the gold tier, and if you don't hear your name, you will see it at the end of the video. Here's a special shout out to Logan K, Becky Adamson, and Musey148. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, I've put a link in the description. And a special shout out to Raider from Ohio. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.